I didn't plan here. The house wasn't even my first choice, or my second. It just happened. The realtor showed me a dozen places that week. Tiny apartments with cracked ceilings, narrow duplexes with neighbors I could hear breathing through the walls, houses that smelled faintly of mildew and regret. Then, on the last day, she mentioned a property on the edge of town. It's old, she said, hesitating as if she'd already decided I wouldn't want it. But the price is surprisingly low. There are some conditions, of course. She didn't explain what those conditions were. I should have asked. The house sat alone at the end of a dirt road, half hidden behind a row of crooked pine trees. The porch sagged slightly, the paint peeling away in strips like old skin. But the structure itself seemed sound. Windows intact, roof straight. And in the late afternoon light, with the sun hitting the faded siding, there was almost a kind of melancholy charm to it. I stepped inside and was immediately old wood and something faintly sweet underneath. It was quiet. Not the kind of quiet you get in the city, where there's always a hum of life in the background. This was thick silence, like the house itself was holding its breath. The living room was spacious enough. Faded wallpaper, wooden floors that creaked under my boots, a cold fireplace against one wall. The realtor's heels clicked nervously behind me as I explored. "You'll need to replace some of the boards eventually," she said, "and, well, the basement is sealed off, has been for decades, but everything else is functional." "Sealed off?" I asked. She didn't answer right away. "It's not uncommon in older homes. Safety reasons." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Upstairs, the bedrooms were modest, windows that stuck when you tried to open them. A single bathroom with an ancient clawfoot tub. Nothing unusual. And yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle awareness at the back of my neck, a prickle that made me keep glancing over my shoulder. Of course, every time I looked, the hallway was empty. I bought the house. I told myself the unease was just nerves, that I was overthinking it. But that first night, lying on the old mattress I dragged into the master bedroom, I heard it. Not loud, not even clear. Just a faint tap, tap, tap. I sat up, holding my breath. The sound stopped. I waited, convinced it was my imagination. Eventually I lay back down, and then it started again. Tap, 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 tap. From somewhere beneath the floor. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, sunlight streamed weakly through the curtains. I convinced myself it had been the house settling. Old wood and cold nights can make strange noises. Still, I found myself avoiding the far corner of the living room. That part of the floor looked odd, bulging upward just enough to catch the light differently. And as I stood there, I thought I saw something else. Long, thin scratches along the grain, like someone had dragged their fingernails across the wood from underneath. I told myself it was nothing. But that night, I moved my mattress closer to the bedroom door, and I left the light on. The second night in the house was worse. I tried to convince myself the first night's tapping was nothing. Pipes, wood settling, my own nerves. But as evening settled in, that uneasy silence returned. It's strange how you can feel silence, like it has weight. By midnight, the house felt like it was listening. I lay in bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. The old wood above me was stained with faint watermarks, patterns that could almost be faces if I looked long enough. That's when it started again. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. It was soft, almost delicate, but there was no mistaking it. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more, from somewhere beneath the floor. I told myself not to move, but the sound kept coming. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. 3:03 a.m. The tapping grew slower. Tap, 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 almost lazy. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the wooden floor cold beneath my feet. Each step toward the hallway felt heavier, the sound growing clearer. Downstairs, the living room was darker than I remembered. The corner where the boards were warped seemed almost shadowed, even in the dim moonlight from the window. I crouched low, my ear inches from the floor. The tapping stopped. I waited, breath held. Then so faint, I almost thought I imagined it. A whisper. Hoarse. "Let me out." I jerked back, nearly falling. The voice was real. I could still hear it, faint, like someone speaking from far away, but it wasn't coming through the air. It was coming through the wood. I didn't sleep at all that night. I sat in the kitchen with every light on, drinking bitter coffee until the sky outside turned pale. The tapping was gone. But when I passed the corner of the living room, I noticed something I was sure hadn't been there before. Another scratch along the warped floorboard. Fresh. I didn't touch the floorboards that morning. I didn't even look at them as I walked past, coffee in hand, pretending the warped corner wasn't there. But the thought wouldn't leave my head. The voice, the scratching, the way the boards seemed just slightly looser than the rest of the floor. By noon, I'd convinced myself it was something explainable, an animal trapped beneath the house, maybe. But animals don't whisper. That night, I lay awake again, the tapping starting right on cue. Tap, tap, tap. This time it was louder, closer, and then it stopped. For a moment I thought it was over. Then came the sound of wood straining, just the faintest creak, like something pushing upward from below. I grabbed a flashlight and a crowbar from the small tools I'd brought during the move. The warped boards almost seemed to shift as I approached, like they were ready to give way. I wedged the crowbar into the seam. The nails screamed as I pried the first board loose. A wave of cold air rose from the gap, damp, earthy, and faintly sweet like rotting flowers. I removed another board and another until I'd opened a gap large enough to see into the crawl space beneath. It was dark, not the kind of dark that your eyes adjust to. This was thick, absorbing, like the space didn't want to be seen. I angled the flashlight downward. That's when I saw it. A box. It was made of wood, so dark it looked almost black, the surface rough with deep scratches. It sat alone, centered perfectly beneath the floorboards as if it had been placed there deliberately. The flashlight beam trembled in my hand. The lid of the box was closed, the edges sealed tight by rusted iron bands. Something about it felt wrong. The lid of the box was closed, the edges sealed tight by rusted iron bands. Something about it felt wrong, old wrong. I reached down and touched the lid. It was cold, not just cool from the crawl space air, cold. The kind of cold that makes your skin ache. For a long time, I just crouched there, hand resting on the box, as if waiting for it to move. Then I hooked my fingers under the iron band and pulled. The lid creaked open an inch. The smell that came out was sharp, metallic, bitter, and unmistakable. Blood. I pulled the lid the rest of the way open. Inside was nothing. Empty. Except for deep, jagged scratches carved into the underside of the lid, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. The sound returned, sudden and sharp. Tap, tap, tap. But this time, it was coming from the box itself. I dropped the lid, it slammed shut with a violent snap, as if something inside had pulled it closed. And in the split second before it closed, I swear I saw movement. Pale, side had pulled it closed. And in the split second before it closed, I swear I saw movement. Pale, skeletal fingers curling back into the darkness. I stumbled back, the flashlight beam swinging wildly across the room. The tapping had stopped. The box was still, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't empty anymore. I didn't sleep, not after the box. I sat at the kitchen table until sunrise, staring at the crowbar lying beside my cold coffee, wondering if I should put the floorboards back in place. Part of me thought sealing it up might make everything stop. Another part of me knew that once the box had been opened, once I'd opened it, things weren't going back to normal. By late morning, I was still wide awake. The house felt different in daylight, less threatening, almost ordinary. But I knew that was a lie. The warped floorboards were still open, the box still sitting there in the crawl space, perfectly still, too still. I needed answers. There's a small library perfectly still, too still. I needed answers. There's a small library in town, one of those old brick buildings that smells like dust and yellowed paper. The librarian was a thin woman with pale eyes who watched me a little too closely when I asked about property records. "What address?" she asked. I told her. Her expression didn't change, but I swear she hesitated before disappearing into the back room. She returned with a stack of faded folders and a single newspaper clipping folded between them. "Everything we have," she said, setting it down. Her voice was neutral, but her hands trembled just slightly. I thanked her and took a seat at a table near the window. The earliest record was from 1954. The house had belonged to a family named Carter, husband, wife, and their young daughter. There wasn't much information until the last page. The husband vanished. The wife told police he'd left town on business and never came back. The husband vanished. The wife told police he'd left town on business and never came back. But neighbors told a different story. One report mentioned shouting late into the night. Another described strange hammering noises that lasted for days. And then, silence. A few months later, the wife and daughter left, no forwarding address. The house sat empty for years. The next clipping was from 1962. Another family bought the place. They didn't last long either. Within 6 months, they moved. No explanation. The only detail was a passing mention in the Halebridge Chronicle. New owners complain of disturbing nocturnal noises beneath the home. Investigation turned up nothing. Every few years, the same pattern repeated. People moved in, people moved out, always within the year, always without giving a clear reason. The final folder contained more recent reports, none official, just rumors. One caught my eye. Local folklore speaks of an object buried beneath, just rumors. One caught my eye. Local folklore speaks of an object buried beneath the Halebridge property, a box said to contain the remains of a man who could not be buried in consecrated ground. The box is to remain sealed. Opening it is believed to bring misfortune, madness, or worse. I left the library with a cold weight in my stomach. The air outside felt heavier somehow, the sky lower. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't afraid of the box because I didn't understand it. I was afraid because I was starting to understand it. I was afraid because I was starting to... That night, it began again, but this time, it wasn't coming from under the floor. It was coming from inside the walls. The tapping began earlier that night. Usually it waited until deep into the hours of silence when the house was dark and my thoughts were loud. But that night, the first knock came just after sunset. Tap, tap, tap. It was subtle at first, almost cautious. Then, after a pause, tap, 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 tap. Faster, more impatient. I told myself I wouldn't go downstairs. That's what it wanted, whatever it was. But the sound didn't stay in the living room. I heard it in the hallway, then in the kitchen, then directly beneath my bedroom floor. I stood, barefoot on the wood. The boards were cold. I could feel the vibration of the knocks through my feet. I wanted to move, but my legs felt heavy, my chest tight. Then came the whisper, clear this time, right below me. Let me out. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and then I realized something. The voice didn't sound angry. I stumbled back, heart hammering, and then I realized something. The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded desperate. That was worse. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Not just the knocking. Now there were other sounds. A slow, dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled across the floor beneath the boards. And breathing. Low. Shallow. At some point in the night, I must have dozed off in the chair by the window, because I woke up at dawn to find the bedroom door wide open. I hadn't left it that way. And on the floor, just inside the doorway, there were 3 long scratches in the wood. I told myself I needed space, time to think. I packed a bag and drove to a motel on the edge of town. The air felt lighter the further I got from the house. But that night, in the stale motel room, I woke to a familiar sound. Tap, 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 coming from inside the wall, just behind the headboard. I left the motel before sunrise. I didn't even think about it. Coming from inside the wall, just behind the headboard. I left the motel before sunrise. I didn't even think about it. No plan, no reason. One moment, I was sitting in the parking lot, hands wrapped around a paper cup of bad coffee. The next, I was pulling onto the dirt road, the trees bending over me like they'd been waiting. The house stood exactly as I'd left it. Still, quiet. Too quiet. The warped floorboards in the living room gaped open, just as I'd pried them, and the box was there, waiting. Something about it changed. The iron bands were looser now, the metal dark with rust as if it had aged years in just a few days. The lid wasn't shut tight anymore. It sat slightly open, just enough for darkness to seep out. I told myself not to touch it. I told myself to seal the floor, lock the door, drive until the house was nothing but a memory. But I stepped closer. The air was colder here, heavier. I could see my breath in the beam of the flashlight. The box was no longer empty. Inside was something. I could see my breath in the beam of the flashlight. The box was no longer empty. Inside was something pale. Hair, long, black, tangled, and beneath it, just for a moment, I thought I saw skin. Not flesh, not bone, skin like damp paper. The tapping started again, but it wasn't coming from the box this time. It was coming from all around me. Walls, ceiling, floor, each knock perfectly in time. Tap, 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 like a heartbeat. I backed away, but my heel caught on the loose board. I stumbled, catching myself on the mantle of the cold fireplace. That's when I saw it, a faint shadow on the wall, tall, thin, standing just behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The living room was empty, but the box, the lid had opened wider. I should have left. I told myself that over and over as I stood there in the living room staring at the box. The lid was open wider now, the black hair spilling out like liquid shadow pooling on the warped floorboards. The tapping had stopped. The silence was worse. Shadow pooling on the warped floorboards. The tapping had stopped. The silence was worse. I took one step closer. The air was thick, heavy enough to press against my skin. It smelled faintly of damp earth. And something else. Something sweet. I knelt beside the box. The hair shifted almost imperceptibly. Beneath it, I saw something pale. Skin, gray-white, cold. My fingers shook as I reached out, just inches away. The hair moved, not like it was drifting in air. It moved, slowly curling back, revealing more of what lay beneath. An eye opened. It was impossibly white, cloudy like glass, but somehow staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat, and then it spoke. Somehow staring directly at me. My breath caught in my throat, and then it spoke. The voice was now. It was everywhere. Inside my head, beneath my skin, pressing against my chest. You opened it. I stumbled back, but the floor felt wrong. Soft, almost shifting under my weight. The walls groaned, the ceiling creaked. The house was breathing. The hair spilled further from the box, stretching across the boards like black vines. They wrapped around the base of the chair, the legs of the table, inching toward my feet. I ran for the door. It slammed shut. Hard, the sound rattled through my bones, the voice again, closer. You opened it, now you cannot leave. The box shifted. Something inside was moving, rising. A hand emerged first, thin, skeletal, the skin gray and stretched tight, nails long and blackened. Then another. The fingers curled against the floor, pulling something impossibly tall, impossibly thin out of the box. I couldn't move. The figure's head emerged, hair tangled and wet, face hidden behind it. It stepped fully into the room, and the box stayed the same size. It stepped fully into the room, and the box stayed the same size. It stood there, head tilted slightly, hair swaying as though underwater, and then slowly it began to lift its face. I don't remember what I saw. I remember the feeling, cold, absolute, like the world had dropped out from under me, like something ancient had looked at me and known me. The next thing I knew, I was on the floor. The box was shut. The hair was gone. But the warped boards were worse. Swollen, splintered, as if something enormous had pressed against them from below. I ran. This time, I didn't stop. Not at the door, not at the porch, not until the house was a speck behind me. I didn't go back to the house. At least that's what I tell myself. But I keep waking up with dirt under my fingernails. And sometimes, in the middle of the night, I realize I'm standing at my window, staring down the road that leads back. The motel feels safer, but it's a lie. The knocking follows me. Not every night. The knocking follows me. Not every night. Sometimes it waits, lets me think I've escaped. Then it starts again. Tap, tap, tap. Sometimes in the wall, sometimes under the bed, sometimes right at my back. I've thought about leaving town entirely. I've tried, but every time I end up on the same road, and there it is, at the end, waiting. The house. I dream about the box now. In the dreams, it's always open. The hair spills out reaching for me. Sometimes I wake before it touches me. Sometimes I don't. And on those mornings, my skin feels cold. Last night, I heard the voice again, closer than it's ever been, not from beneath the floor, not from the walls, from inside my head. You opened it. You can't leave it open. I don't remember driving. I don't remember unlocking the door, but I remember standing in the living room. The floorboards are gone now. The crawl space is open, and the box is waiting. It's wider now. The lid gapes, black hair spilling across the room. Black hair spilling across the room, curling toward me. The air is cold enough to burn my lungs. The voice is right next to my ear. Let me out. I'm writing this down so someone knows, so someone will understand. If you're reading this, don't go near the house. Don't listen to the knocking. And whatever you do, don't open the box.